Maryland basketball is finally ranked, but can the Terps get to a top 10 team?
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day. And I'm also doing work at Inside Black and Gold. So make sure you guys go over to Inside Black and Gold for all your latest Terps news. And today's episode is brought to you by the Gametime app. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Maryland basketball finally gets ranked in the top 2020, top 25. I was about to say in the top 2025, in the top 25, which is huge news for the Terps that they're finally ranked. It's the first time in nearly 2 years where the Terps were ranked. We weren't ranked at all last year. Of course, you guys all remember how bad of a year it was last year, how we struggled overall, how things just weren't clicking right. The roster wasn't built right. We were bottom of the Big Ten last year. It was a really bad year for Maryland basketball, and I thought it really hurt us in terms of our kind of what people expected Maryland basketball. A lot of people thought down on Kevin Willard after that year, and a lot of people just didn't really think Maryland basketball was in the best spot. I honestly thought we were going to be in a tough position. I thought we might continue to go downhill. I remember I had a couple episodes about it. I was like, I don't know where we go from here. We lose Jameer Young. I was like, there's a real good chance Julian Reese enters the portal. But credit to Kevin Willard for figuring it out and actually keeping everybody that we really wanted to keep. But specifically Julian Reese, Deshaun Harris-Smith, Geronimo as well. But really credit to Kevin Willard for being able to rebuild this roster. And I think being ranked is a big deal this year for Maryland basketball. I think that's kind of where we want to be as a program. We want to be consistently ranked, and that's exactly where Kevin Willard has us. He has us as a team that's ranked 18th in the country, and I think we deserve that. I think we've put together a really good resume, and so I think it's really awesome that Maryland can get some of that energy going behind Maryland basketball, because we're a basketball school at the end of the day. And I think we got kind of disrespected in a couple of polls. I thought the poll a couple weeks ago before we went on our big road trip against Washington and Oregon, even though we ended up losing those two games, kind of disrespected us. And then the poll that was just a week ago, I thought, where we were ranked 27th, I thought before we played Wisconsin, I thought for sure we should have been ranked in the top 25. But sometimes it doesn't work like that. There's always an argument for both sides, to be completely honest, and you have to earn being ranked. And it's not only like we're ranked 25th, 24th, like we're the 18th best team in the country. And that's a really cool spot to be for Maryland basketball. And I think it's exactly where the Terps want to be. If you told me before the season that right now, beginning of February, what is it, February 4th, first couple of days of February, we're ranked 18th in the country, I would say we're in a great spot. I couldn't ask for a better spot, because I thought it would take a second for everything to mesh. Maybe I thought we had a lot more talent than last year, but I thought maybe it would take a second for the transfers to get used to everything, for those different things, but it hasn't. And we ended up cracking not only the top 25, but the top 20, which is a really cool spot to be. College basketball, it's tough to get ranked. There are so many good teams. There are so many elite teams. So it's definitely not easy to get ranked at all. There are so many solid teams in college basketball, different from college football, where it kind of feels like after the top 5, 10, there's usually kind of a drop-off. Like when you get to the 23rd best team in college football, they're not nearly as good as the number 6 team in college football, the number 5 team in the college football. Where college basketball, the 40th best team in the country can compete with the best team in the country. And it's a really cool type of sport in that way. And so for Maryland to be a top 25 team, I think is a really good spot, again, for the Terps to be, but we can't get satisfied. Maryland basketball can't get satisfied. We'll see how we play with the ranking next to our name. We'll see if it changes. It's been cool because we've been fighting, we've been clawing to get to be a ranked team. And now we have a chance to prove why we were in the top 25. Before, we had to prove that we should be in the top 25. Now we have a chance to say why we are a top 25 team. And I think we have an opportunity, a really unique opportunity where we got a lot of the big dogs in the Big Ten, some of the top teams out the way, and we have a pretty light schedule for the next couple of games. And I think we can be a top 10 team in the country after the next couple of weeks. It might sound crazy. It might sound far-fetched, but if you look at Maryland's schedule, it's a lot of winnable games and games that Maryland's going to be favored in. College basketball is usually not that linear. It's not usually just beat the teams you're supposed to beat and you lose to the teams that you're supposed to lose to. It doesn't really work like that. I would argue no sport is really like that. College football is closer to that. College basketball, really anything can happen, like you see in March Madness. But college football or college basketball, it's a little bit different. But still, Maryland definitely is hot right now, beating 21 Wisconsin, beating 23rd ranked Illinois a couple weeks ago, beating Indiana, beating Nebraska, getting a huge win over UCLA. Like, we're in a really good spot where we've won a bunch of games. And so I think we're hot. Now we've had a little bit of a layoff, a little bit of a break, not having a game last weekend, but Maryland realistically can get in the top 10. Look at the next games that we play. We play Ohio State, Rutgers, Nebraska, Iowa, and USC. None of those teams, I don't think, could be wrong, but I think Maryland will be favored in every single game. The Ohio State game is an interesting one, and I think USC is starting to get better, but I don't see a game necessarily that Maryland should lose, like that Vegas is going to be like, yeah, Maryland's underdogs. I see games where Maryland should be favored in and should realistically win. Now, we're one of the hotter teams in the country, and I think it's perfectly reasonable to think Maryland could go undefeated in this stretch before we play Michigan State, and we get Michigan State at home before we play number 9 Michigan State on February 26th. So we got some time until that. I think Maryland could go on a really big win streak, beating Ohio State. We've already beaten them once. I think we match up well against them. It's on the road this Thursday. I think that's a game we absolutely could win. And then I think Rutgers, I talked about it yesterday. I don't think Rutgers is that great. Freshmen don't win in college basketball. That's not how you win games. You win by having experience. Yeah, you can have a really good freshman on your team like Maryland does, but it can't be like the focus point. It can't be all that you got. And I think Rutgers at home is definitely going to be a win. Nebraska isn't that great this year. That's a game the Terps should win as well. Iowa isn't that great either. USC has picked it up, but Maryland should be a better team. Like, there's a world here where Maryland wins every one of those games. Would I predict that to happen? Probably not. No, I say we probably slip one, maybe even two, which wouldn't be the end of the world. I definitely can see us losing one. That's just the way it goes. In college basketball, you're not going to shoot well one night. It's going to be an off night. Like, that's just what it is. But even if you lose one, you still put yourself in a really good position. And if you somehow go undefeated in all the games, you should win. So I'm not talking about some miracle to happen for the Terps. I'm talking about if you win games you're supposed to win, games you're favored in, it's how many games is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games until you play number 9 Michigan State. If you win those 5 games, you put yourself in a position where you could be a top 10 team. You could be a top 10 team. You could put yourself in a place where you potentially are a 3 seed in the tournament, a 4 seed in the tournament, and really climb. Or right now, I see it's kind of as a 7-6 seed. You could climb and be all of a sudden a 4, a 3 seed if you really win the games you're supposed to win, and you could be a top 10 team by February 26th when you play Michigan State, and that could be a top 10 showdown. I really do believe that. I mean, you can make up some big time ground in the Big Ten where you're sitting at fourth right now. You could get somewhere really even higher than fourth. Fourth's pretty good in the Big Ten. It's a tough league. Michigan State has some tough games left still. They play UCLA, which isn't an easy game at all. They play Oregon still. They play Indiana. They play Illinois. They play Purdue. They play Michigan. They play us. They play Wisconsin. Like, I'm looking at Michigan State's schedule, who's number one right now. They could definitely drop. And if Maryland starts winning games they're supposed to be winning, they could put themselves in position to win the Big Ten. I really believe that. And you still get two teams that are above you in the rankings. You still get to play Michigan, and you still get to play Michigan State, and you could really do damage there and climb the Big Ten. I think it's something that you could really end up doing because we got a lot of the big dogs out the way. We got a Purdue out the way. We played Illinois. We've gotten some of these really good teams, Wisconsin, out the game, where now we have a kind of a light schedule where Michigan State got their light schedule earlier, and we can make up a ton of ground, and I think that's really exciting. Let's talk some Maryland football. I just looked at a way too early prediction for next year, and we'll see. I'll tell you guys where they predict the Terps. Is it too low, too high? I'll talk about that next. Looking for tickets for your next big event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding tickets to the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Gametime Picks for a while now, and here's why I love it. The curated deals makes it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options. I recently grabbed a super deal for a prime seat, and I couldn't believe the value. It was a steal. The seat view feature is a game changer. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly what my seat will look like in the venue. It's so reassuring. And the best part is you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guaranteed. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund you for 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with easy cancellation options if something comes up. Ready to take your next event even better? Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So I was looking at some stuff to talk about for today, and I decided let's do something fun. Saturday Blitz, which is a website that talks about college football, did their way too early preseason Big Ten rankings for 2025. And I want to react to it because I think it's interesting where people view Maryland football. I think it's one of the weirdest spots for a team because I think we looked like we were headed in the right direction, and then all of a sudden you hit a down year under Michael Locksley, where Billy Edwards was a quarterback. You only win 4 games. You just don't look like a great team. You can't really win many Big Ten games. Your highlight of the season is beating USC. It's just like things didn't look good for Maryland football last year after making 3 straight bowl games, 3 straight bowl wins with Talia and co. And so I think it's kind of interesting to see where people view us. And I want to keep it a buck. I'm not going to be over positive. I'm not going to be over negative. I'm going to keep it honest. I'm going to keep it real. So this is kind of where they see things. I'll just read a couple teams. They have Purdue at the bottom. They have Northwestern second to last. And then they have Maryland at the 16th worst team in the Big Ten next year. And then some of the teams at the top, if you guys are interested, they have Ohio State, which makes a lot of sense. That team's going to be loaded. Penn State. They have Oregon up there. They have Michigan. They have Indiana up there. So those are some of the teams at the top. But they have Maryland as finishing as one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, which I think is interesting. Now, there's a couple different ways to approach this. In terms of roster, in terms of returning talent, I think it makes sense. To be completely honest, we don't have a billion guys returning. We don't have a good amount of guys returning. We don't have a decent amount of guys returning. we don't have much returning talent at all, or returning production. We have some guys that are talented, but we don't have returning production. So I think in terms of returning talent and production, and guys that you know names of, and guys that have performed at a high level in the Big Ten, we don't have a ton of that. Like if you go through position group, quarterback, no. Running back, no. Receiver, no. Offensive line, kinda, but that was our worst position group last year. Tight end, no. Defensive tackle, inside defensive lineman, no. Edge, kinda. Linebacker, kinda. Corner, no. Safety, no. Like every single position group, it's pretty new for the Terps. So I think in terms of returning talent, we are near the bottom. And that's just the way it is. Just look at the Maryland roster. We don't have a bunch of guys returning. And as well as our team wasn't that great last year. So maybe it's a good thing that we don't have a ton of guys returning. You can look at it in different ways in that way. So that's part of this situation that I do think is interesting, is that Maryland doesn't have a ton of returning talent. So I think that makes sense. But you guys have to remember, Maryland's schedule next year is awful. It is terrible in terms of good for Maryland. We finally get one of these favorable football schedules where it's like, oh, wait, we're going to be able to win games if we're a decent team. We don't even have to be that great. We just have to be decent, and we're going to put ourselves in position to win a lot of games because we avoid a lot of the big dogs when we look at it. So in terms of returning talent, you might have us as a bottom team, but when you look at when you combined talent to schedule, you might put us more middle tier. We play Wisconsin, Washington, Nebraska, UCLA, Indiana, Rutgers, Illinois, Michigan, Michigan State. Michigan's the only team we play next year that was in their top 4 teams. And even Michigan has a lot of kind of new. They're going to have a new quarterback. Of course, there was rumblings about the Billy Edwards going there, but that didn't end up happening. They had that 5-star number 1 recruit in the nation. We'll see what happens with him. But outside of that, it's not a ton of teams that you feel that you're scared about. It's a lot of Wisconsin, like, okay. Washington, okay. Nebraska, okay. Like, there's not a ton of teams that you feel scared about, whereas some of these other teams have harder Big Ten schedules. So you might say, okay, Maryland's at the bottom in terms of returning talent, but I do think, one, Mike Locksley did a good job in the portal. I'm not going to say a great job in the portal, but I think he did a good job. And then we also bring in a really good recruiting class. Now, I like to compare college basketball and college football a lot. To be completely honest, a big-time recruiting class in college basketball means a lot more than it does in college football. In college football, obviously you want to let me rephrase that. It means a lot more in terms of what they can do as a freshman in college basketball versus in college football. It's more about what they can do for you and probably 2-3 years for you. So that's kind of, it's a difference that does matter. And so I think that Maryland has a good freshman class, but I don't know how much that's going to necessarily matter, is what I'm saying for next year. So I do think it makes sense to have us as a bottom returning team in terms of, if this article said in terms of returning talent, but way too early power rankings. So I guess power rankings would be kind of where you are in terms of talent and not schedule. So I do think that makes sense. But if you're doing an actual prediction for where Maryland football is going to finish, I don't think it's going to be that low. And that's no bias. That's not me trying to hype up the Terps. That's just the way the schedule lies. I think we're a team that's more 2 years away, and I think we can be really good in 2 years if Locksley can retain people, Locksley can continue to recruit at the way he is. But we'll see what happens. I think it's going to be an adjustment year with potential, with, yes, a new quarterback, yes, a new offensive coordinator, new scheme. I think that could be interesting, and we could be playing a lot of freshmen. So I think that that's kind of my outlook, but I do like to read these kind of way too early rankings because I think they're interesting, and I think people try with them. I think they have I think a lot of times people are too quick to be like, the list is terrible just because their team's too low or too high. But when you really take a step back and look at it, a lot of it's pretty honest. And so I thought that was interesting. The NFL draft is coming up for the Terps. let's talk about that. Some big storylines coming out from this weekend. We'll talk about that next. So I don't know if you guys saw this, but Dante Trader got a huge shout out from Mel Kiper for his performance the last couple years at the Big Ten and these different things. Mel Kiper seems to love Dante Trader. You guys all know Mel Kiper, I feel like. Mel Kiper's kind of the leader or is the leader in NFL draft stuff and what he does for ESPN. I don't know exactly how much film he watches on these players. He knows everybody. He has his draft board, and it's usually pretty similar to the way the actual draft goes. Obviously not exact, but for somebody that has all these prospects, he does a really good job of putting each player into kind of a category, giving them a range. And he talks about players he likes in the top of the draft. Obviously, he's going to talk about a lot because that's what a lot of people care about. But he also talks about guys that are going to go later on, some of his favorite guys. And Dante Trader got a huge shout out from Mel Kiper. And he raved about Dante Trader, saying he was a standout during the Senior Bowl practice. And he talked about him being a former lacrosse player. And he got second in tackles this year, third in tackles the prior years. He talked about how he had an interception every single year. And he said he's pound for pound one of the best players in the Big Ten. And I thought this was interesting because I don't have time to go back and watch film like Mel Kiper does. Just being a student, like I can't do that. So I really depend on these types of things to see kind of what people think, because I'm watching the game live, and the safety is something you're obviously looking at, but that's not something that's like you're popping every single play. And so the fact that Mel Kiper has watched Dante Trader, watched his snap, it's really interesting to kind of hear what he has to say about a guy like that, because it's like, okay, Mel Kiper seen every snap of Dante Trader and thinks he's one of the best players in the Big Ten. I thought Dante was good. I had no idea where he lied in the draft. I thought, okay, maybe he's a 6th round, 7th round guy. Maybe he's undrafted, and we still don't know. Mel Kiper doesn't make the draft choices. He just talks about where he thinks guys should go. But he's usually pretty close to right. But I never thought of Dante as like pound for pound one of the best players in the Big Ten. I never thought about him like that. I thought he was a really good Big Ten player, but I never thought of it as him as one of the best players in the Big Ten. So the fact that Kiper is saying that Dante Trader pound for pound is one of the best players in the Big Ten, I think speaks weight, because we know how many guys he watches. We know how many guys he talks about. We know how many teams he watches. So if he's talking about a guy on ESPN and highlights him, it's because he's a good player. It's not just for giggles and stuff like that. It's because he really believes that guy's a good player. He doesn't just do it because he does it because he thinks this guy's a really high-end player, because he doesn't have time to highlight every single guy or to get into every single player or the video. People don't have time to put together a video for every. They don't have time for that. So if he's going to highlight someone, he really believes that they're a good player, because Mel wants to be right in a couple of years. He wants to look back, and he wants people to look back and say Mel Kiper was right. He was right on Dante Trader. He's a guy that Dante went in the 5th round, but we should have drafted him higher. And he looks like a really good player now for the Terps. So Mel Kiper obviously wants to be right. So when he's talking about somebody, people are going to listen. Even draft actual scouting departments, they're going to listen. And so I wonder if this boosts his draft grade at all, but it was really interesting to see. We have other guys that are going to go as well that have been impressive. Jordan Phillips had a really good Shrine Bowl. Dante had a good couple of days as well. Ty Felton's been doing some really good things. So there's going to be Maryland players that are drafted. We'll see exactly how it goes. We still have some time. We got the Super Bowl. Let me know what you guys' Super Bowl picks are, but we got some time as well. So I think that's going to be interesting too. That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked on Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you guys for listening to Locked on Terps.